Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nedling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everybody, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Nedling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. Today, I am so excited to have my guest, Jerry Fu. As always, the goal of this podcast is to bring guests and topics that will help leverage what you're doing today in your business and take your business or your life to the next level. Let's tell you a little bit about my guest, Jerry Fu. He is a conflict resolution coach. No one listening, I'm sure, needs this, but I thought I'd bring it to you anyway. His focus is on Asian American leaders, but I'm sure that what he's going to tell you is going to be good for anyone. He started coaching in 2017 to help other Asian American professionals deal with challenges they encounter at work, with their families, and within themselves. Prior to starting his coaching business, Jerry worked as a pharmacist, as you can see behind him, and began facilitating workshops in 2012. Today, he offers a range of coaching services, which includes individual coaching, group workshops, and keynote presentations. In his free time, we like the same things here: travel, going to new restaurants, and lots of salsa dancing. Awesome. Could have a whole show on salsa dancing. I chose a theme of why coaching is so important to leadership. And the reason is that sometimes leaders think that they don't need a coach. And we're here to tell you that's wrong. So let's join, or please join me in welcoming Jerry Fu. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Vicki. Hi, everybody.
So I always start with an easy question, and that first easy question is always, where do you call home? Where do you live?
Yeah, home is currently Houston, Texas. I've been here for the last 12 years now. I was originally here for college. I left undergraduate after my junior year to start pharmacy school. And then after I finished up pharmacy school in Tennessee and worked at home in Knoxville for a couple of years, I moved back to Houston 12 years ago and have can't believe how the years fly by. But yes, I'm in Houston now. Hope I don't have to leave anywhere and move anywhere else.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. It's been a while since I've been to Houston. I think it's probably about 10 years since I've been there. So what got you into coaching? I mean, you're a pharmacist. It's just not something, whenever I read it in the bio, it's like, it's not something you think about, although anybody could be a coach. And obviously, as we were talking before the show started, conflict resolution is probably something that comes up when you're dealing with expensive drugs or people that don't understand and you have to calm them down. But what was that driver? What pushed you into going into coaching?
I guess the first statement I often share when sharing my journey is that leadership is what saved my career. And to elaborate on that, I worked for a chain pharmacy for the first 5 years. I was a pharmacist because my mother, being an immigrant from Taiwan, didn't want me to have the same career struggles that my father had, despite having a master's degree in both computer science and chemical engineering.
Wow.
And so she wanted me to have the stability that he never really had. And on one hand, it was very well-meaning. I can certainly appreciate that we're all looking for some level of stability.
Right.
But that stability cost me more than she wanted me to, wanted to admit that it cost me in terms of just burnout and quality of life. And
Yeah.
after I'd had enough, after 5 years, I said, I need something different. And so I leveraged my connections to get a teaching job through a pharmacy consulting company that I moved to Houston for 12 years ago, and then proceeded to get fired 11 months later. And part of that was an aversion to conflict. I didn't like dealing with problems that I didn't want to admit that I'd caused, and I didn't like it when my boss was upset with me, which kept happening more and more frequently until the company said, no, we've had enough. Sorry, you're done.
Yeah.
And that was the first wake-up call.
Yeah.
The second wake-up call is 6 weeks later when I found another job. It ended up being a house of cards where 4 of my paychecks bounced, filling for crooked doctors. So not only was I jeopardizing my license, I wasn't even getting paid for it. And how do you confront a boss who's clearly ripping you off? Not in life's manual, right? So the struggle with conflict, the struggle with leadership, I didn't know how to lead people well. I didn't know how to handle difficult conversations well, especially in a chain pharmacy where you're just taught to take the path of least resistance. Whenever someone makes an unreasonable demand, it's just not fun. And no one tells you how to handle it better, because that would mean that you're actually going to win arguments, right? And so after I got out of that house of cards job, my friends helped me get on with another company that was more legit, but couldn't pay me more than 8 hours a week. And so I asked them, well, what do I do to make up for the income gap? And they said, well, we have more hours available for you if you're willing to work at our Austin location, which is 2.5 hours. I could end up in worse cities. So I said, well, beggars can't be choosers. I'm going to work out in Austin. And this was 10 years ago now. So I'm working in Austin. I have no idea what my life is going to look like. And that summer was key because some friends of mine who run a pharmacy leadership nonprofit said, hey, we know you've been facilitating workshops on the fraternity side, but one of our leader facilitators had to back out. And so we were wondering if you could step in. And I said, absolutely. I love these pharmacist friends of mine. And so teaching leadership kind of changed my thinking around my own belief in myself as to whether or not I could be a good leader. And before I just said, I hated feeling incompetent. I hated having difficult conversations. I still hate them, but I feel more confident in being able to engage them. And so I said, well, what if I could be a good leader? What would that look like? How would I carry myself? And so when a full-time manager position opened up in Houston a couple months later, I said, absolutely. Had a great team in Austin. Love that group. And I knew I couldn't afford to stay comfortable. And I wanted to sleep in my own bed again. So I said, all right, going to come back to Houston. And I thought, I can finally exhale. 11 months later, I get written up and put on probation because my technicians are not pulling their weight, and I don't have the courage to discipline them or fire them. And so management said their behavior is a problem and your passivity is the bigger problem. We need you to get better at this pretty quickly. And so eating more humble pie. And I said, well, okay, now what do I do? And so as I'm on probation, the company has their funding pulled. And so, I was already looking for other work, but now it's just a little more urgent. And the only reason I got an interview with my next job was that I had leadership experience in my resume. So that's the first chunk of, hey, this is how pharmacy still had a career for me once I agreed to become a leader in pharmacy. And the problem, though, that still remained was that these smaller jobs that offered the quality of life I was looking for didn't last very long. The business models weren't sustainable. So it was like hopping from iceberg to iceberg as it melted. And after about 5 years ago, when my last employer went under because of insurance trauma, I said, I'm tired of begging doctors for scripts. I'm tired of fighting insurance contracts that dictate, how much my time and energy and efforts are worth. But I love people development. So what would a career in coaching, facilitating workshops look like? And again, still very scared of failing rejection. So it's just more of a hobby than anything else. And then I decided to get formal coach training right as the pandemic ramped up. And so very strange timing.
Yeah, really.
And in the process of surviving the pandemic, thankfully, I'm grateful for my pharmacy job. That's how I paid my bills. And I realized I didn't want to put off this dream any longer. And in the process of being certified as a leadership coach, I had to ask myself, is this my niche? What was I going to focus on? And for better or worse, my own personal struggles, whether through work or through other relationships, like I had to evict a roommate at one point because he defaulted on his lease. And you just realize whether I chose conflict resolution, it's more like it chose me. And so that's why, I have a heart for people who struggle with conflict, because I myself still struggle with conflict. And the
Yeah.
difference is that not that I feel more confident in, running toward the fire to put it out, but I have enough of a system in place to compensate when I know I don't want to put out the fire and I need to put it out anyway.
Yeah, it's been there, done that. You own the t-shirt.
Yes, several.
Oh my gosh. Well, so you gave us a great background and history to make us understand why you did what you did, but what is setting you apart from other coaches out there?
Yeah, great question. I think it's a combination of authenticity, because I use the formula I give away on my website every day. Every time I run into a situation that I immediately want to shy away from or devolve into pity, I take my own medicine like every day, right? Another is just I know where to pull relevant stories and resources. Just I read a lot of interesting books, a lot of useful books, and whether I have a story to share from my own life or one from a book that will be useful to my clients, I'm going to find something that's going to grab your attention and something to study that you can, really grow from and pull from. And then, I believe just coming through for my clients, just showing up every day and being there for them and being attentive to their needs. And I'll give a quick example because, a pharmacist friend of mine signed up for a career coaching program specific to pharmacy careers. And she dropped several $1,000s, for this program, and ended up, demanding a refund and thankfully getting one because of my help. And so not directly because she already had a lot of good things in place, but just a little fine tuning on my part. But, why would she choose me even after she initially, thought that this program would meet her needs, right? So I think that's one clue to say, well, maybe Jerry's pretty good, not because I want people to know how good I am, but that I would be the guide that they need to be their own hero, right? In their own story. Yeah.
Sounds like you listen to their needs and give them what they need, which is always important.
Yeah.
So since you have been in the fire, what are some common mistakes that people are making with conflict?
Yeah. I think some of the most common one is to not even think that a good outcome is possible, right? They've already written off the situation as something they have to deal with, and that the other person is just going to dig their heels in, and then, well, hey, you know what? Better say something than not, but nothing's really going to change. And that's a common trap, because if you don't believe success is possible, I mean, don't expect to attain it, right? Another is to think that they have to strong arm people into compliance. They think, oh, I got to go in there and I got to twist their arm and show them that I'm right about this, and they have to get on board with this. And, when people are simply agreeing with you just to get you off their backs, it's not good for the relationship, and you're still not going to get the result that you ultimately want. A third is interrupting. That's a fun one. Just when you listen to respond instead of listening to listen. You're actually the need to feel like you have to respond in that moment shows you're not really listening to them. And when people feel disrespected because you're not listening to them, you're just escalating the problem. So those are three of the top mistakes that I know I've made that I know are very common when I have to coach people through situations like this.
I think every married couple has gone that last one.
Yeah, it keeps happening.
I know. Yeah, it's funny. In the opening, we talked about the fact that, it's the conflict in work and also at home and with yourself. But, I think sometimes we deal with the conflict at work or our jobs, our careers a lot better than we do with those that we love. Yeah,
and it's hard because at work there's still a level of distance to say, okay, I'm just gonna, I can cool off, I can create distance, or I can just fire the person. I decide I can find a way to just not have to deal with this issue. But when and the paradox of marriage is that the whole point of this is that you can be yourselves and
Yeah.
be fully accepted and fully accept the other person. But it is hard because our nature is protection and survival instead of openness and vulnerability and a willingness to grow, regardless of whose fault it is, if we want to use that phrasing. Yeah, it is, and I mean, there's a reason why the divorce rate is what it is that it takes a lot of work.
Everybody's trying to be the right, right, and we know sometimes in conflict resolution, there isn't a win-win. There is a compromise.
Yeah. Well, that's
what are some tips though to resolve a conflict? We just started talking about it, but how do you resolve conflict effectively?
Yeah. And so you can kind of take the flip side of some of the mistakes, and that's what kind of goes into the framework that I use for myself and for others. The first is to imagine that a conversation could be successful, right? And to say, hey, maybe it could just be as easy as, hey, let me ask my roommate if he could stop leaving dirty dishes in the sink, right? Is it realistic? No, but is it possible? Yes, right? And so all you need is that glimmer of hope to say, you know what, maybe this can go
maybe.
well. Maybe.
Good.
You know what? I won't know until I try, right? The second, which is the favorite tip for a lot of people, is to find 10 seconds of courage to initiate the conversation. And that basically tells people, hey, you don't have to be a superhero. You just need to be a superhero for 10 seconds. Can you send that email? Can you send that text? Can you pick up the phone and say, hey, I'd like to get something on your calendar so that we can discuss the situation, right? Some people wait until they kind of game plan before they initiate this contact, and it's okay. Like, these steps are not set in stone in this particular sequence. But for most people, this is what allows them to set the ball in motion, shut the gate behind them so they don't fall back into rationalizing, right? Another common mistake where they say, oh, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe I can deal with it tomorrow. Meanwhile, the fire is burning things down. Yeah. Resentment doesn't go away on its own.
No.
So that's the second step. The third step that I use is to script my critical phrases. To say, hey, let me not just let these thoughts rattle around in my head. Let me put them on paper. And now that are on paper, I can look at them and get them organized and make sure I include everything I want to say, or at least figure out what the most important things are. And then, now that I know what I need to say, how are they going to push back? Let me anticipate the ways that they will, have a rebuttal. If I ask my boss for a raise and he tells me, oh, well, money's too tight to give you a raise, how am I going to respond to that, right? Let me at least have something ready to say when I know I need to counter the counter. And then step 4, it's not enough to list these on paper, right? You didn't just do homework. You actually have to make it come to life. And so practice your phrasing, iron out words so you don't trip over them in the moment. Practice with a friend, right? Rehearsal can only help you. You want to train in the dojo before you fight on the street. You want to get your reps in on the practice session before you play in the actual game, right? So you want to check your body language, check your tone. Is it calm? Is it composed? And then step 5 is to follow through, because you didn't do all this work just to feel good about yourself. You did this to get some results. And the funny thing is, and this is where people realize that, hey, it's not a one-time shot, and if it failed, okay, I give up. Sometimes you maybe if you tried and it just goes really off the rails, okay, it's okay. Like, at least I tell people, at least if you're going to have a falling out with someone, they should know exactly why you're upset with them, right? I've had roommates where I just held it in too long, and then I just realized, you know what, if we've already ruined the friendship, they should know exactly why, this friendship didn't last. And so those are the 5 steps that I use to help engage conflict more effectively.
Yeah, I think you really can't discount how important or helpful role playing is. With another person is great, but at least do it in your mind before you go into that. It just is really helpful. And I think having, as you get into that situation, if it starts to go awry, I always find it helpful to, let me just step away for a minute, just disengaged and then re-engage. I think sometimes helps. What would your thoughts be on that?
Oh, yeah. The more you realize that things are escalating and emotions starting to spiral out of control, it's always good to just call time out right?
Yeah.
Just to say, hey, can we, you know, things don't seem to be going, that well between us. Can I ask your feedback on things, right? To have that humility and say, hey, do we even agree on what we're working toward? Because if we
Yeah.
aren't, we need to agree on that. Let's recalibrate, let's reevaluate, because the goal, right, I think, is just to make sure that we get to a solution together. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be ideal. It doesn't have to be, like you don't want to defer too much because that leads to resentment as well. But to be able to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, this isn't ideal, but you know what? We both work toward it. I'm willing to buy into it. And so, yeah, like you said, if you need space, ask for it, right?
Yeah. And
It's obviously a case by case basis.
yeah, I think too, it's sometimes it is just to have both parties know that they were seen, that they were heard,
Mm-hmm.
and that, hey, I'm not going to agree and you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
agree, but at least we both know, as you mentioned earlier, where we stand,
Mm-hmm.
and we agree to disagree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a great example of there was a mine that was acquired by a new company, and there was some debate between the new company that said, "Hey, this financially doesn't make sense," but of course the miners are like, "No, you have to keep it open. Their people's jobs are,
Mm.
counting on this, right? And we have to find a way to make it work." And you just saw a lot of people just digging their heels in, but then they shifted to a more productive conflict discussion about what would it take for this to be the best option? Like, what would it take in order to keep the mine open? How could that be the best option, right? And so now people are arguing over concepts as opposed to people. And the tough thing was that they came to the tough decision. Even the foreman of the mine endorsed the fact that they had to close the mine because they understood, what they pushed for our case, and we all agree that, as unfortunate as this is, we have to close the mine. And this is, how do you get to that point? It's possible, right? So, yeah.
So, what are the three most powerful questions as a leader
Mm-hmm.
that we need to ask?
Yeah, yeah. I think some of my favorites are, what's the real challenge here for you?
Mm.
Right. So, and we're in the middle of a situation of telling us all these things, and this first question just helps kind of distill the essence of what's really going on underneath,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because when they say, "Hey, I keep telling my son to clean his room and he doesn't clean it," and too often we as coaches and that advice hero mode, right? We want to say, "Well, try this phrasing, give him an incentive, give him money, or withhold his allowance or other things." But then if we ask the question, what's the real challenge here for you? And you realize maybe they say something like, "Well, I feel like a bad mother,
Mm.
if I twist his arm too hard, right?"
Yeah,
Like, and then you realize, oh, now we're getting to the real issue, right? That this is what we need to solve. That's the prerequisite to anything external we do, right?
that's really
Um,
key.
yeah. Another question is, well, what are you learning right now, right? And just to kind of, as we said, we just kind of step back for a second. Well, what kind of valuable lessons can we extract from this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And then a third one that we usually like to wrap up with is, well, what's your next action, right? And that keeps people from pointing fingers. It
Yeah.
keeps people from getting steeped in regret, because it's always forward moving, and it's also active, because they
Mm-hmm.
want you to say, well, what are you going to do next? Because that's really where the change happens, is
Yeah.
taking action. Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're stuck
Yeah,
in that
your vision
endless,
stays a dream.
right?
Yeah,
You're in
yeah.
that endless resistance loop, regret loop, goes.
Yeah.
All right, time is flying by. It is time for rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
I have 5 things to talk about.
Let's do it.
What are 3 life hacks you would have given your younger self?
Yeah. First one is just take advantage of audiobooks. Because if you're stuck in traffic, you're still learning something. If you're taking a walk, you're learning something. If you're, prepping food, you're learning something, because, it's like you could settle for what's on the radio, or you could be intentional about the content you're giving yourself. And I think that's one thing. The second is to travel more, like look for opportunities to really open up yourself, open up your mind to new experiences. And yeah, just that there's a certain humility that comes from stepping into a country where you're just like, okay, I don't know the layout, I don't know the language, and I need to figure something out. So I'd say that's the second one. And then a third is, I would say, design a morning routine that generates momentum, right? Like, and this is a new answer. I didn't always use this one. This is the first time I've said something that specific from previous podcasts. And what I mean by that is to say, hey, start your morning off, journal for, even if it's just 2 or 3 sentences, just, dump what's on your mind. Meditate for like 5-10 minutes, right? Do a couple stretches. And, when you have a routine in place that kind of helps center your mind and helps you stay present, and you already feel like you've accomplished something, that momentum leads to better things. Like, I took this tip from Lewis Howe's book, just that, hey, make your bed, right? Sometimes that's all it takes. Yeah, every day. Yeah. And I actually get mad now because it's just, I fluff the blanket once and then I'm just like, you know what? That's all it took. Yeah, let me just straighten this. And then you're like, you know what? That's all good. Now what are we going to do next? So,
every day.
Yeah.
Awesome. Why do you love salsa dancing?
That could be a whole episode. But the simple answer is that, it makes you stay present. It is musical, it's active, it keeps you in shape. You get connected with other people who are creative and active and musical. And, the sense of connection you get when you're dancing with a partner, or even if you don't have a partner, and just the ability to express yourself as if no one's looking. It's been such a transformation in my life. From something that people used to make fun of, and they say, oh, no one would take ballroom dancing as an elective in college. And then you see what kind of community you're missing out on, and you start to believe, and just the idea of a growth mindset applies so much to dancing, and to know that's just going to be a lifelong journey of improving and helping others, inspiring others to enjoy this as well. That's why I love dancing. It also helps that it took one skilled, pretty blonde to really, be like, I gotta show up for her. And that also that's some icing on the cake.
Falls into play.
Yep.
So what 3 books, you talked about audiobooks, what 3 books are you reading now that you'd recommend?
Oh man. Yeah. I love, there's one called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, I think is her name. She's an Ivy League graduate who was in finance but ended up becoming a poker player. And so she has some great stories about how to take calculated risks. And in an era of uncertainty more than ever, the book is definitely relevant. What else do I like? I love Decisive, which is along the same lines by Chip and Dan Heath. They talk about, how do we have a framework to guard against our neurological biases, and to make sure that, we're actually making, like wise decisions through our process, and not just defined by our results. Designing Your Work Life is a book I walk a lot of people through, and one I listen to a lot on my own, because learning to design a career that you really love. And, whether that involves just tinkering with your routine, changing your environment, or having to reinvent yourself, it's all there. And just to know this is an iterative process, because even if you get the job that you love, like that may not satisfy you in another 5 years, and you need to be ready to reevaluate and experiment more. So those are some books.
And I think that really ties into, embracing uncertainty, because if you're constantly knowing that you're reinventing, and change isn't a bad word.
Yeah, absolutely. You need change more than ever. And the word agile keeps coming up, right? Where you need to be nimble, you need to fail fast, you need to fail cheap. Because that stability that we all want, it's not where we think it is.
For sure. Who is your ideal client?
Oh man. Yeah, my ideal client is an Asian American leader in their 20s and 30s because they're at that, like, I would say ripe, but that's the word I'm going to use here, the ripe age where they realize that what their family tells them isn't necessarily relevant or accurate anymore. And, they are realizing that, yeah, the culture they grew up in doesn't translate to the culture they work in necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also reevaluating what it means to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the people that understand, hey, you know what? I think I need some kind of sounding board or an outside resource to really help kind of catalyze, um, you know, calibrate my focus and make sure that I don't just dream up big ideas, but actually act
Mm-hmm.
on them. So yeah, it's kind of what we tied into earlier.
Yeah.
You can't, people need coaches, but um, it doesn't matter how much they need them if they don't recognize it for themselves, right? Like trying to rescue someone who's drowning when they don't think they're drowning is actually going to hurt both of us. So wait until they're, you kind of want to generate that awareness, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But even if they say, yeah, I know how much I need one and I still can't afford your rates, well, hey, at least you're honest.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
But it's, as you said, it's a lot of the problems, especially entrepreneurs have,
Mm-hmm.
are unique to them. And
Yeah.
their moms or dads or cousins or brothers or sisters,
Mm-hmm.
if they're
Yeah.
not doing it, they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And you do need somebody that's been there, done that.
Yeah.
What's next big thing on your journey?
Yeah. For those of you who are audio only, yeah, we kind of hinted at the fact that the shelves behind me are filled with drugs because I'm helping record this podcast from my day job, and so the next thing on my journey is to help turn my part-time leadership coaching business to the full-time emphasis of my career. And so yeah, I'm looking to really kind of accelerate the growth, I guess is what I'm looking for, so
Yeah.
that I don't have to keep relying on pharmacy jobs to help pay my bills. I want to be able to do coaching full time. So that will be next on my list.
Awesome. Well, let me go ahead and give a warning to those that are just listening in that I'm going to share my screen, but I will share the website for Jerry and he'll talk to you about a gift he has. So let me share my screen. All right, so Jerry's website is www.adaptingleaders.com, which is www.adaptingleaders.com. Again, that's adaptingleaders.com. So you want to go to that website, adaptingleaders.com, and find out more about Jerry. But he is on social media. He's on LinkedIn, and you can find him by his name. He's put an E in there. So Jerry E. Fu, Farm MD. So that's PHAR. I guess if you just search Jerry Fu, you'll find him on LinkedIn. And I'll let Jerry talk to you about his gift.
Yeah. So I'm giving away a free guide on that unpacks the 5-step framework that we referred to earlier in our conversation. And you can find that at www.adaptingleaders.com/guide, GUID, like dog E. And there's like a great case study that talks about how that applies in a real life situation. And yeah, by all means, check out adaptingleaders.com. You can schedule a complimentary 30-minute call. Let me know how you're doing. Check out the free blog for life hacks and summaries on useful, interesting leadership literature. And yeah, please, but enjoy the guide. It's a great value at no cost to you. And I hope it pays dividends when you apply it to your own life.
That's right. And if you have a conflict coming up, you know who to call, not Ghostbusters.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. It's been such a great time talking with you. You gave a lot of great tips, wonderful background story. And, it just goes to show, you get up, you fall down, you get up, you fall down, but you don't give up. So I think that's great life lessons. Again, if you are looking for some more information, some more tips, please go to Jerry's website, check him out on LinkedIn, and definitely like the podcast and subscribe so that you can hear more of these great things. As always, I remind everyone that life is a journey and it is up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Nethling with Jerry Fu saying bye for now.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.